I found out my family has a group chat without me, and it wasn't what I expected. I'm a 29-year-old guy, the middle child sandwiched between two brothers, Peter, 34, and Luke, 25. If you'd asked me a few weeks ago, I'd have told you we're a pretty close-knit family. We're not perfect, but we've always been there for each other. At least, that's what I thought. Lately, though, things have fell off. It started with small stuff like not being in on jokes during family dinners. Peter and Luke would be laughing about something, and when I'd ask, they'd just say, "Oh, it's nothing," or change the topic. I shrug it off at first. I've been busy with work, and I figured I was just missing out on group chats or quick catch-ups. But then it started happening more often. I'd find out about family plans at the last minute, and Peter would reference something I had no clue about. It was like there was this invisible thread connecting everyone except me. The first real sign that something was up happened at a family barbecue. We were all hanging out in the backyard, and Luke was showing Peter something on his phone. They were giggling like kids, and I asked what was so funny. As soon as I spoke up, the laughter died. They exchanged this weird look before Luke stuffed his phone in his pocket and said, "Oh, it's nothing important." It was awkward. I tried to laugh it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something. The weirdness hit a new level last weekend. I was at my parents' house helping my mom with her laptop. She's terrible with tech, so I'm the unofficial tech guy of the family. While I was sorting out her email, her phone buzzed on the table. I didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up, and I caught a glimpse of a notification. The family chat. The message preview was from Peter. "Just don't mention it in front of him today." My stomach dropped. The family chat? What the hell? I thought I was in the only family chat we had. You know, the one with the usual boring stuff, grocery lists, reminders, the occasional meme. But this wasn't that chat. This was something else. Something I wasn't a part of. I didn't say anything to my mom. I just handed her back the laptop and made up an excuse to leave. On the drive home, I kept replaying that message in my head. Just don't mention it in front of him today. What were they hiding from me? Was it something about me? Did I do something to upset them? I decided not to confront anyone right away. Instead, I started paying closer attention. I remembered a few months ago when plans for a family trip got changed at the last minute. At the time, they said it was because of Peter's work schedule, but now I wasn't so sure. And then there were the inside jokes I didn't get, the side conversations that ended as soon as I walked into the room. I pulled up my own phone and scrolled through our family chat. It was exactly what I remembered, dry, basic stuff. Nothing like the message I saw on my mom's phone. There were no discussions, no jokes, no plans being made. Just logistical messages like, "Who's bringing dessert on Sunday?" It felt like a placeholder chat. Something to keep me from noticing there was another, more active one. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer, so I called my best friend, Brandon. We've been friends since college, and he's usually good at talking me down when I start spiraling. I told him everything. The weird looks, the secret chat, the message I saw. Brandon joked that maybe they were planning a surprise party for me or something, but even he didn't sound convinced. He told me to just ask them about it directly, but I wasn't ready for that yet. If it wasn't something innocent, I didn't want to look paranoid or crazy. So I decided to test the waters a bit. The next time I saw Luke, I casually asked if there were any new group chats I'd missed out on. He got this deer-in-the-headlights look before quickly saying, "No, just the usual one." His answer was too quick, too rehearsed. It confirmed what I already suspected. He was lying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the possible reasons for the secret chat. Had I done something to upset them? Were they talking about me behind my back? I grabbed my phone and did what any sane person would do. At 3 a.m., I went on Reddit. I searched for a family secret chat and was surprised to find a bunch of posts from people in similar situations. Some discovered their family was planning a surprise, but others uncovered much worse. My anxiety skyrocketed as I read through those threads. The idea that my family might be hiding something serious from me kept me awake all night. The next day, I tried asking Peter a similar question, just to see if I'd get a different answer. He played it cool, saying there was only one family chat, but I noticed he wouldn't look me in the eye. It felt like he was deflecting, trying to steer the conversation back to work or something else. I left the conversation more convinced than ever that something was going on. I knew I couldn't keep tiptoeing around this forever. I was either going to drive myself crazy with overthinking, or I was going to have to confront them. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed more information. I decided then and there that I was going to get to the bottom of it. even if it meant having an uncomfortable conversation with everyone. I've always trusted my family, but now I'm starting to wonder if I've been naive. Either way, I'm going to find out what's really going on, and I'm not stopping until I get answers. The next Sunday, we had a family dinner at Peter's place. It was one of those regular get-togethers we've been doing for years. Everyone brings a dish, we sit around the table, and catch up. I figured it was the perfect time to test the waters. I wanted to see if I could get any of them to slip up without making it too obvious that I was digging. We were in the middle of dinner, talking about random stuff like Luke's new job and the latest movie Peter had watched. I casually mentioned how I had to mute a few group chats on my phone because they kept blowing up during work. I made a joke about it, pretending it was no big deal. I noticed it immediately, the slight pause. Luke glanced quickly at Peter, who didn't look up from his plate. A rush of adrenaline shot through me. I wasn't imagining things. There was definitely something they weren't telling me. After a moment, I went for it. "Hey, are there any group chats I'm not in?" I asked, keeping my voice light. It was almost like I was joking, but not really. The room went silent for a beat too long. Luke gave a nervous laugh and started talking about dessert, as though I hadn't just asked a direct question. My mom got up to clear the dishes, moving quickly, while my dad seemed completely oblivious, focusing on the last of his mashed potatoes. Peter, though he still didn't look up, asked me about work instead, as if he was trying to steer the conversation away. It was too obvious. I couldn't believe they were being this blatant about it. I leaned back in my chair and said, "I know there's another family chat. I saw a notification on Mom's phone last week. That got their attention." Peter finally looked up, his face tightening. He didn't even try to hide his annoyance. My mom turned around from the sink, looking guilty as hell, while Luke's smile dropped. My dad still had no idea what was going on. The tension at that dinner was unbearable. When I made it clear that I knew about the other group chat, no one even bothered to deny it. My mom just looked away, nervously fiddling with the plates in front of her. Peter stared at me for a moment before letting out a heavy sigh, and Luke stared at the floor like he wished he could disappear. The only one who seemed clueless was my dad, who kept chewing his food, completely oblivious to the heavy atmosphere in the room. "Well," I pressed, crossing my arms. "Is anyone going to explain what's going on? Why is there a family group chat that I'm not part of?" Peter was the first to speak, but his tone was full of impatience. "It's not a big deal. Just a place for quick chats. You're overreacting. If it's not a big deal, why hide it from me?" I shot back, feeling my irritation rise as he tried to brush the whole thing off. Luke opened his mouth, but hesitated. I could see he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the right words. My mom finally muttered, "It's just that sometimes we thought you wouldn't be interested." That hit me like a punch. Wouldn't be interested? Interested in what? Do you think I don't care about the family? Is that it? That's not it, okay? Peter interrupted, now visibly frustrated. "It's just that you're always busy, always working. It was easier to keep a separate group for planning stuff." "Easier?" I laughed bitterly. "You decided to exclude me because it was easier? Do you have any idea how that sounds?" No one responded. The silence was unbearable. I pushed back from the table, throwing my napkin onto my plate. "If it's so insignificant, then show me the group. I want to see what you've been talking about." My mom finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Of course, it's not a good idea," I snapped, sarcasm dripping from my tone. "Because you're hiding something?" Peter sighed loudly. "You're being paranoid, you know? There's nothing wrong with the group. It's just more convenient." I didn't believe him for a second. Convenient for who? Because it doesn't seem very convenient for me. Sitting in the dark while you all make jokes, plan events, and talk about things I don't even know are happening. Luke, who had been silent until then, finally blurted out, "Okay, yes, there are things in the group we didn't want you to see, but it's not what you think." "Oh, so you were talking about me behind my back?" I asked, my heart pounding. That was my biggest fear, and hearing it confirmed only made the betrayal worse. "It's not like that," my mom pleaded, her voice almost breaking. "It's just sometimes you can be difficult." "Difficult?" I repeated, disbelief washing over me. "So instead of talking to me, you all decided to create a group to talk behind my back? Like I'm some kind of problem to be solved?" Peter stood up too, clearly irritated. "You know what the problem is? You always do this. You always assume the worst, always make yourself the victim. Sometimes it's just easier not to deal with it. That was a low blow, but before I could respond, Luke dropped a bombshell that turned everything upside down. And there's also the issue with the will. What? My body froze for a moment as I processed what he had just said. What will? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. My mom tried to interrupt, but Peter shook his head, glaring at Luke for mentioning it. You weren't supposed to know about that yet. Weren't supposed to know what? I demanded, my voice rising. Do you all think you get to decide what I can or can't know about my own families? That's when my mom finally caved. Your dad and I, we made some changes to the will. It was complicated, and we thought it would be better to talk about it when the time was right. Changes? I asked, suspicion dripping from my voice. What kind of changes? No one answered. I looked at each of them, waiting for an explanation, but their silence said it all. You took something from me, didn't you? You're cutting me out. Even from this, Luke tried to soften the blow. It's not like that. It's just, Peter has been helping a lot with things around the house and, oh, I get it. I interrupted, laughing bitterly. Peter's the favorite, of course. Always has been. So you decided to reward him at my expense? We're not taking anything from you, my mom insisted. We just adjusted a few things to reflect reality. Reality? I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. The reality is you decided I'm not part of this family the same way they are. You think you get to choose what I deserve to know, what I deserve to have. I couldn't stay there anymore. I grabbed my things and walked out, ignoring my mom calling after me and Peter's grumbling. As I drove home, my chest felt tight, and my mind spun with rage and hurt. All of it, every lie, every secret, had shattered any illusion I had left about my family. They betrayed me, and I knew I'd never see them the same way again. I left that house with a heavy heart, but a firm decision. I was done wasting my energy on a family that clearly didn't value me. For years, I had been there solving problems, putting their needs before mine. Now, it was time to change that. If they wanted to exclude me, they would have to learn how to live without me. In the months that followed, I completely distanced myself. I didn't answer calls, ignored messages, and stopped showing up at family gatherings. I knew it bothered them. Gradually, I started hearing through mutual acquaintances that things weren't going well for them. Peter, the so-called hero of the family, couldn't handle half of the responsibilities I used to take care of. He wasn't the type to deal with technical issues or make important decisions. Luke, on the other hand, was completely dependent on me for practical matters and was now lost. My mom began sending more insistent messages. At first, they were subtle invitations. Come over for lunch. We need to talk. Then they became more direct. I don't know what to do with the computer. It won't turn on. And eventually, desperate. Peter is overwhelmed, and Luke doesn't know how to help. Please, we need you. I read all those messages without feeling the slightest urge to respond. For years, I had been their support system. When something went wrong, I was the one they called. But when it came to making decisions, sharing jokes, or forming a secret group chat, I was disposable. Not this time. This time, they would have to figure it out on their own. Meanwhile, I focused on myself. I went back to studying, dedicated myself to new projects, and reconnected with friends I had neglected because of the time I spent helping my family. I rediscovered a passion I had long forgotten: photography. I dusted off my old camera and started exploring the world around me, capturing landscapes, moments, and stories. Slowly, I began to build a new life, lighter, freer, and completely mine. As my life started to thrive, there seemed to fall apart. Peter, who had always seen himself as the leader of the family, couldn't hold things together. Luke was incapable of contributing anything useful. My mom, who had relied on me for every technical issue and difficult decision, was lost. With every desperate message I received, my conviction that I had made the right choice grew stronger. One day, my mom showed up unannounced at my door. She looked exhausted and visibly upset. She said things at home were a mess, that they didn't know what to do, and that they missed me. You've always been the backbone of this family, she said, her voice breaking. Without you, everything feels so confusing. I looked at her for a moment, unsure of how to feel. For years, I had been the backbone, but not because they valued me, because it was convenient for them. Now that my absence was felt, they were finally realizing how much they had taken me for granted. I took a deep breath and replied calmly, "I understand that things are difficult, Mom, but I can't keep being responsible for solving everyone else's problems. I spent years doing that and losing myself in the process. Now I've chosen to focus on my life." She started crying, trying to convince me that the family needed me. "Peter is overwhelmed, and Luke can't handle anything. Without you, we're lost." For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but then I remembered all the times I had been ignored, excluded, treated as an outsider. "I'm sorry things are hard," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But this was your choice. You chose to leave me out. And now, I've chosen to move on." She tried to insist, but I stood my ground. I thanked her for coming, told her I hoped they would figure things out, and walked her to the door. As I closed it, I felt an immense sense of relief, knowing that for the first time, I was choosing myself. From that moment on, my life took a new direction. I got a better job, traveled, met incredible people, and built a network of friends who truly valued me. Photography, which had started as a hobby, became a serious passion. Soon I was showcasing my work in local galleries. I discovered a talent I never would have explored if I had still been caught up in my family's drama. My family kept trying to bring me back, but I never gave in. I learned that I wasn't responsible for fixing other people's problems, especially those who didn't appreciate me. Focusing on myself was the best decision I ever made, and now I live a full life, surrounded by people who truly matter. They betrayed me, and in the end, they were left to deal with the consequences of that choice. As for me, I discovered that the true value of family isn't in blood, but in the people who choose to genuinely stand by your side.
I found out my best friend had been sleeping with my fiancé for months while I was planning our wedding. So I did something that shocked everyone. My name is Rachel, and I'm about to tell you how the best day of my life turned into the worst betrayal I could ever imagine. 3 weeks before what was supposed to be my dream wedding, I sat in my apartment surrounded by cream envelopes, each one carefully addressed in my own handwriting. "Are you sure about the seating arrangement?" Maya asked, holding up our chart. She'd been my best friend since college, and honestly, I don't know how I would have managed any of this without her. While other friends had drifted away after getting married or moving for work, Maya had always been there. "Put them near the back," I said, addressing another envelope to David's boss. "You know how loud they get after drinks." Maya laughed, that familiar sound that had gotten us through late-night study sessions and heartbreaks. "Remember when your cousin brought that karaoke machine to your birthday? Don't remind me." I sealed another envelope. "At least at the wedding, we'll have actual entertainment." The venue was perfect, a restored Victorian mansion with fairy tale gardens. David had initially wanted something modern, but after seeing my eyes light up during our first visit, he'd agreed immediately. That's what I loved about him. He always put my happiness first. "I still can't believe you're getting married before me," Maya said, genuine happiness in her voice. "Remember planning our dream weddings in our dorm? You wanted Hawaii. I wanted the full princess treatment. And you're getting it." I smiled, thinking about the dress hanging in my closet, layers of silk and lace that made me feel like royalty. Tomorrow was my final fitting, and Maya had promised to come. She'd been to every appointment, every cake tasting, every consultation. Sometimes I joked she was more invested than I was. "Hand me those stamps." As Maya passed them, I noticed her phone buzzing. The screen lit up with a text, but she quickly turned it face down. "Everything okay?" "Just work stuff," she said quickly, something off in her tone. "You know how demanding my boss can be." I nodded, though I couldn't shake the feeling she seemed more distracted lately. But we were all stressed with the wedding approaching. David had been working longer hours, claiming his company was going through a busy period. "I can't wait for this to be over," I admitted, sealing the last invitation. "Don't get wrong, I'm excited to marry David, but this planning is exhausting. It'll be worth it," Maya said softly. "You two are perfect together." Something in her voice, a wistfulness I'd never heard before. When I looked up, she was staring out the window with an expression I couldn't read. "Are you sure you're okay? You seem different lately." She turned back with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, just tired. Planning a wedding is hard work, even for the maid of honor." That evening, after Maya left and I'd dropped off invitations, I decided to surprise David with dinner. He'd been working so much lately, and I thought a quiet evening together would be nice. I picked up his favorite Thai food and headed to his apartment. I was reaching for my key when I heard voices inside. David was talking to someone, his voice muffled through the door. I paused, key halfway to the lock, when I heard him say something that made my blood run cold. "Can't keep doing this. She's getting suspicious." I pressed my ear closer, heart pounding. A woman's voice responded, but I couldn't make out words. It was familiar, though. Someone I knew. "After the wedding," David said more clearly. "We'll figure it out after the wedding." My hand trembled as I finally inserted the key and opened the door, making noise to announce my arrival. "Honey, I'm here!" I called out, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. David appeared from the living room looking flushed. "Hey, babe. You're early." "I brought dinner." I held up the bags, scanning his face for guilt. "Who were you talking to?" "Just a work call. You know how it is." He kissed my forehead, but something felt different, mechanical, like going through motions. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I'd been too busy to see. Little things that probably meant nothing, but together they painted a picture I didn't want to acknowledge. David had always been punctual, but lately he'd been coming home later with increasingly creative excuses. Budget meetings that ran long, client dinners, urgent projects that couldn't wait. When I asked for details, he'd give vague responses about corporate stuff and change the subject. Maya was acting strange too. She'd cancel lunch dates last minute, claiming sudden work emergencies or family obligations. When we did spend time together, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and responding to texts with secretive smiles. "Who keeps texting you?" I asked during our florist appointment. We were finalizing centerpieces, but she'd been on her phone more than listening. "Oh, just this guy I've been talking to," she said, slipping her phone away. "Nothing serious." "Since when are you dating someone? Why didn't you tell me?" "It's really new." I didn't want to jinx it by talking too early. That should have made me happy. But something felt wrong. Maya had never been secretive about guys. She was the type who'd call after every first date to analyze details. The florist showed us arrangements, and I tried focusing on white roses versus cream peonies. But I kept noticing how Maya seemed to know things about the wedding we'd never discussed. "The cream peonies would look beautiful with the gold accents you chose," she said. I stared at her. "What gold accents?" "Oh, I just assumed. Didn't you and David decide on gold table settings? We talked about it, but I never told you that. We haven't made a final decision." She fumbled for words. "Maybe David mentioned it when I ran into him at the coffee shop last week." "You ran into David? You didn't tell me that." "It was just a quick hello. He was rushing to work." But David went to the coffee shop on 5th Street every morning, and Maya worked across town. What was she doing there? That night, I mentioned the encounter to David casually. "Maya said she saw you at your usual coffee place." "That's funny. I didn't know she went to that area." "Oh yeah, I think she was meeting a client nearby." He didn't look up from his laptop. She just waved hi. But Maya had said they talked. Someone was lying, and I suspected it might be both. The breaking point came during our final cake tasting. I'd been looking forward to it all week. One of the last big decisions we needed to make together. Maya and David both promised they'd be there at 3 sharp. I arrived early, excited to finally settle on our cake. 3 o'clock came and went, then 3:15. At 3:30, I called Maya. "I'm so sorry," she said, traffic in the background. "Something came up at work. I'm stuck in a meeting running way over. Can we reschedule? But David will be here any minute. We need to decide today. Just pick whatever you think is best. I trust your judgment completely." After hanging up, I felt deflated. This was supposed to be fun. Something we'd do together. I was sitting alone at a table covered with cake samples when my phone rang again. "Babe, I'm so sorry," David said before I could speak. "Emergency at work. The Peterson account is falling apart, and I need to handle it personally. Can we do the cake thing another day?" "You've got to be kidding me." I looked at the beautiful samples, each representing hours of the baker's time. Maya already canceled too. This is the 3rd time we've rescheduled. I know. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Just pick whatever you want. You have great taste." The baker gave me a sympathetic smile. "Happens more often than you'd think, dear. Wedding planning can be stressful for everyone." I spent the next hour making decisions alone, trying different flavors and imagining their reactions. The chocolate ganache was rich. David would love it. The lemon cream was light, Maya's favorite kind of dessert. As I left with our final cake order, I realized I'd been making lots of decisions alone lately. David had missed our DJ meeting last week, claiming another work emergency. Maya had skipped my final dress fitting, saying she trusted everything would be perfect. But despite missing appointments, they both seemed to know details about decisions I'd made. David mentioned loving the song list before I'd told him what we'd chosen. Maya complimented my dress alterations before seeing them. It was like they were getting information about our wedding from some other source. The afternoon that changed everything started like any Tuesday. I'd taken a half day off work to handle last-minute wedding errands, picking up rings, confirming catering details, then stopping by David's apartment to surprise him with lunch from his favorite deli. I'd been feeling guilty about how paranoid I'd become. Every innocent interaction seemed suspicious. Every delayed text felt like evidence of conspiracy. Maybe David was right when he said I was just stressed about the wedding. Maybe I was seeing problems that didn't exist. So I decided to do something spontaneous and romantic. Like when we first started dating. I picked up Turkey Club sandwiches and his favorite cookies, planning to surprise him during his lunch break. He'd been working from home that day, needing to focus on a big presentation without office distractions. When I reached his building, I felt that familiar flutter of excitement that came with surprising someone you love. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, balancing lunch bags while fumbling for my key. But as I approached his door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. That was odd. David was obsessive about locking up. Even when home, I pushed it open gently, expecting to find him on a video call, or maybe having stepped into the hallway for a phone call. "David," I called softly, not wanting to interrupt if he was on a work call. No response, but I could hear voices from his bedroom, low, intimate voices that made something cold settle in my stomach. I should have called out again, should have made my presence known. Instead, some instinct made me set the lunch bags down quietly and move toward the voices like I was approaching a dangerous animal. "I can't keep pretending," I heard a woman's voice say, and my heart stopped. I knew that voice better than my own. "Maya, I know, baby. I know." David's voice was softer than I'd heard it in months, filled with tenderness that used to be reserved for me. "Just a few more days and then we can stop pretending." I pressed myself against the wall outside his bedroom, my entire body trembling as I strained to hear every word. "This is killing me," Maya continued, emotion clear in her voice. Watching her plan this wedding, helping her pick flowers and cake flavors, listening to her talk about how excited she is to spend her life with you. I feel like the worst person in the world. "You're not," David said firmly. "We didn't plan this. It just happened. But she's my best friend. She trusts me completely. And here I am, in love with her fiancé." The words hit me like physical blows. In love with her fiancé. My fiancé. "I've been in love with you since that night at the wine bar 3 months ago," Maya continued. "Remember? When she had to work late and couldn't make dinner, so you asked me to keep you company? We talked for hours about everything except her. 3 months ago. They'd been doing this for 3 months. "I remember," David said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "You were wearing that blue dress, the one that brings out your eyes. I couldn't stop staring at you. I thought I was imagining it. The way you looked at me, how our conversation flowed. It felt so natural, so right." It was right. This is right. There was a long pause, and I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from making any sound as nausea rolled through me. "What happens after the wedding?" Maya asked finally. "I can't watch you marry her and then pretend everything's normal. We'll figure it out. Maybe we'll tell her the truth. Maybe we'll wait and then I'll ask for a divorce. I don't know yet, but I know I can't live without you." "A divorce? But you're not even married yet. Why go through with it at all?" "Because calling off a wedding 3 days before would raise too many questions. Her parents have spent a fortune. My whole family is flying in. It's easier to just go through with it and deal with consequences later." The room started spinning. I gripped the wall for support as the full magnitude crashed over me. This wasn't weakness or a mistake they regretted. This was calculated. They were going to let me walk down that aisle, exchange vows with a man who loved someone else, then continue their affair behind my back. I spent the rest of that day in a haze, mechanically going through normal life while my world crumbled. When David called that evening asking about my day, I somehow managed to sound normal, even cheerful. When Maya texted about final wedding preparations, I responded with the same enthusiasm I'd shown for months. But inside, I was dying. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 3 months. Every canceled plan, every secretive glance, every time they'd seemed to know something they shouldn't. The signs had been there. I'd just been too trusting, too busy, too in love to see them. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed proof, real, undeniable evidence of what I'd heard. Because as devastating as it was, part of me still hoped I'd misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about someone else. Maybe it was some elaborate surprise. Maybe my stressed brain had twisted innocent words into something sinister. I called in sick to work and began the most important investigation of my life. First, I checked David's laptop while he showered. He'd always been careless about passwords, using our anniversary date for everything. His email revealed nothing obvious, but his browser history told a different story. Searches for romantic restaurants downtown, weekend getaways near the city, how to tell if you're in love with your best friend's boyfriend. That last search hit me like a punch. Maya had Googled it just 2 weeks ago. I screenshotted everything before closing the laptop, hands shaking as I heard the shower turn off. Next, I went through Maya's social media more carefully than ever before. Her recent posts seemed normal on the surface, but when I looked closer, I noticed things. A photo of her coffee cup at the same cafe where David got his morning coffee, posted at the same time he usually stopped by. A picture of her dinner at a restaurant I recognized as David's favorite, taken on a night he'd claimed to be working late. I made a list of dates and times, cross-referencing them with David's excuses and absences. The pattern was unmistakable. The real breakthrough came when I remembered David's old phone. He'd upgraded 2 months ago, but kept the old one in his desk drawer for backup purposes. Men always underestimate how much women remember about their habits. I found it buried under work documents, and miraculously, it still had battery. Even better, he'd never properly cleared his text message history. What I found there destroyed any remaining hope of misunderstanding. Hundreds of messages between David and Maya, going back 3 months exactly. The early ones were innocent enough. Discussions about wedding plans, jokes about my attention to detail, complaints about work stress. But then something shifted. Thanks for keeping me company tonight. Rachel would have loved that restaurant. I had such a good time. We should do it again soon. I can't stop thinking about our conversation last night. Me too. I feel like I can tell you things I can't tell anyone else. And then gradually they became more intimate. I know this is wrong, but I can't stop thinking about you. I feel the same way. What's wrong with us? Nothing's wrong. This feels more right than anything has in a long time. I love you. I know I shouldn't say it, but I do. I love you too. God, I've been wanting to say that for weeks. I scrolled through months of declarations of love, plans for secret meetings, discussions about guilt and how they couldn't help themselves. They talked about me too, which was almost worse. She asked about the gold table settings today. I almost forgot we hadn't discussed it with her. Be more careful. She's starting to notice things. Sometimes I feel like we're living in an alternate universe where she's planning a wedding that's never going to happen. Don't think about it that way. We'll figure out how to tell her after everything calms down. The messages continued right up until yesterday. While I was picking out wedding favors, they were texting about missing each other. While I was confirming photographer details, they were planning their next secret meeting. I took photos of everything, tears blurring the screen as I documented the complete destruction of my life. 2 years with David, 8 years of friendship with Maya, all built on lies. That night, something fundamental shifted inside me. The devastation was still there, raw and overwhelming, but it was joined by something else. A cold, calculating fury I'd never felt before. I'd spent my entire life being the understanding one, the accommodating one, the one who kept peace and avoided confrontation. When David wanted to postpone our first vacation because of work, I'd smiled and said we could go another time. When Maya forgot my birthday because of family drama, I'd told her it didn't matter. I'd been so busy being the perfect girlfriend and friend that I'd forgotten I had the right to expect better. Well, no more. I spent hours researching, planning, thinking through every possible angle. If David and Maya wanted to use my wedding as cover for their deception, then my wedding would be exactly where I'd expose them. They wanted to avoid embarrassment? I'd give them embarrassment they'd never recover from. But it had to be perfect. It had to be undeniable. And it had to hurt them as much as they'd hurt me. I started by making a timeline of their affair, cross-referencing text messages with David's work excuses and Maya's mysterious cancellations. The pattern was even more damning when laid out chronologically. They'd been meeting at least twice a week for 2 months, always when they told me they were busy with other things. The restaurant where Maya posted that dinner photo, David had claimed to be working late that exact night. The weekend Maya said she was visiting her sick aunt, David had told me he was at a work retreat. Their lies were so elaborate and coordinated that it must have taken real effort to keep stories straight. Next, I gathered the most damaging evidence, screenshots of their love confessions, photos of them together that Maya had clearly tried to keep private, location data showing them at the same places at the same times. I compiled it all into a comprehensive file that told the complete story of their 3-month affair. Then I started thinking about logistics. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon. Maya would be standing right next to me as my maid of honor. David would be at the altar, waiting to promise his life to me while knowing he'd already given his heart to someone else. Perfect. I spent the next day acting completely normal. When David stopped by to discuss last-minute details, I was the picture of a glowing bride-to-be. When Maya called to confirm our spa appointment for Friday morning, I gushed about how excited I was to finally relax before the big day. They had no idea that I was systematically planning their complete and utter destruction. The breakthrough came when I remembered something my cousin who worked in tech had told me about creating shareable photo albums for events. You could upload a collection of photos and send a private link to specific people, and they'd receive a notification to view them. It was perfect for sharing wedding photos with family after the ceremony. Except I wasn't planning to share wedding photos. I created the digital album using a fake email address, uploading every piece of evidence I'd gathered: the text message screenshots, the coordinated lies, the proof of their secret meetings, everything that showed the complete scope of their betrayal. I wrote a simple message to accompany it: the truth about Maya and David's 3-month affair, which they planned to continue after my wedding. Then I prepared the recipient list: both sets of parents, David's groomsmen, Maya's family, close relatives, and mutual friends. People who deserved to know what kind of people they'd been supporting and celebrating. But I wouldn't send the links until the perfect moment. Friday night, at the rehearsal dinner, I watched David and Maya play their parts perfectly. David gave a touching speech about how lucky he was to have found his soulmate, how he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life with me. Maya tearfully talked about watching her best friend find true love, how she'd never seen me happier than I was with David. The guests were charmed. Our parents were emotional. Everyone kept commenting on how perfect we were together, how obvious it was that we were meant to be. I smiled and nodded and played the blushing bride, all while thinking about how satisfying it would be to watch their faces when their perfect facade crumbled in front of everyone they cared about. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and bright, like something from a fairy tale. I woke up at 6 a.m. feeling more rested than I had in days, despite barely sleeping. There was something liberating about finally knowing the truth, about having a plan, about taking back control of my own narrative. Maya arrived at my apartment at 8 sharp with coffee and croissants, just like we'd planned. She looked beautiful, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, wearing the lavender dress we'd chosen together months ago. She was the picture of the perfect maid of honor, ready to support her best friend on the most important day of her life. If only she knew. "Today's the day," she said, setting down coffee with hands steadier than mine felt. "How are you feeling?" "Surprisingly calm," I said. And it was true. The anxiety and doubt eating at me for weeks were gone, replaced by crystal clear purpose. "I feel like everything is finally going to work out exactly the way it's supposed to. That's the sign of a bride making the right choice," Maya said, squeezing my hands. "David is such a good man. You two are going to be so happy together." I studied her face as she said it, looking for any crack in her performance, any sign of guilt or hesitation, but she was flawless. If I didn't know better, I would have believed every word. "I keep thinking about how we used to plan our weddings in college," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "Do you remember what you used to say you wanted most in a husband?" She was checking her phone, probably for messages from David. "You said you wanted someone who would put you first, no matter what. Someone who would choose you over everyone else, even when it was difficult." She looked up from her phone, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Fear? Recognition? "That's still what I want," she said quietly. "I hope you find it someday." I hope so too. The photographer arrived at 10, followed by my sister and 2 other bridesmaids. My apartment transformed into a whirlwind of activity: hair curlers and makeup brushes, champagne glasses, and nervous laughter. Everyone kept commenting on how radiant I looked, how confident and happy I seemed. "Some brides are basket cases on their wedding day," my sister said as the makeup artist applied my lipstick. "But you look like you're exactly where you're supposed to be." "I am," I said, catching Maya's eye in the mirror. "Everything is happening exactly according to plan." While the others were getting ready, I slipped into my bedroom and made my final preparations. I queued up the digital album I'd created, double-checking that all evidence was properly uploaded and the recipient list was complete. I set up a delayed send for the links. They would go out at exactly 4:15 p.m., 15 minutes into what should have been my wedding ceremony. I also prepared a backup plan. I'd printed some of the most damaging text message screenshots and sealed them in elegant envelopes, labeled with key family members' names. If the digital plan failed, I had physical evidence ready. But I was confident it wouldn't come to that. Technology had gotten me into this mess by revealing their betrayal, and technology would get me out by exposing them to everyone who mattered. Rachel? Maya knocked on my bedroom door. The photographer wants shots of you in your dress before we leave for the church. Coming, I called back, taking one last look at my phone. Everything was ready. In 6 hours, the truth would finally come out, and David and Maya would face the consequences of their choices. The wedding dress was even more beautiful than I remembered. Layers of ivory silk and delicate lace, with tiny pearls sewn into intricate patterns across the bodice. It had cost a fortune, but looking at myself in the mirror, I felt like it was worth every penny. Not because I was getting married, but because I was about to deliver the performance of my life. Oh my God, Maya breathed when she saw me. Rachel, you look absolutely stunning. David's going to lose his mind when he sees you, added my sister, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The photographer captured it all, Maya helping me with my veil, my mother fastening my grandmother's pearl necklace, all of us laughing as we maneuvered my dress into the car without wrinkling it. The church was packed, every pew filled with people who'd driven hours or flown across the country to celebrate what they believed was the happiest day of my life. Afternoon light streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across white roses and baby's breath lining the aisle. I stood in the back vestibule with my father, listening to gentle conversation murmurs and soft organ notes. Through partially open doors, I could see David at the altar, looking genuinely nervous in his black tuxedo. His best man whispered something, and he managed a shaky smile. Maya was already at the front, having walked down the aisle moments before to take her place as my maid of honor. She looked beautiful and serene, playing her part perfectly right up until the end. You look radiant, sweetheart, my father said, adjusting his tie nervously. I can't believe my little girl is getting married. Thanks, Dad. I squeezed his arm, genuinely touched by the emotion in his voice. He didn't deserve what was about to happen, but there was no way to protect him from the fallout. I love you. I love you too. David's a lucky man. The music changed, signaling time for my entrance. The congregation rose to their feet, and I could feel their collective anticipation like a physical force. 150 people turning toward the back, waiting to see the bride in all her glory. I took a deep breath and nodded to the wedding coordinator. The doors opened fully, and suddenly I was walking down the aisle on my father's arm, moving slowly and gracefully, just like we'd practiced at rehearsal. The church was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. Every detail was perfect. The flowers, the lighting, the music, the faces of people I loved gazing at me with joy and approval. My mother was crying happy tears in the front row. David's grandmother was smiling and nodding. My college roommate was taking pictures with her phone. This should have been the moment I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl. Instead, it felt like I was walking toward my own execution, or rather, toward David and Maya's. When I reached the altar, my father kissed my cheek and placed my hand in David's, the gesture that was supposed to symbolize him entrusting me to the care of the man I loved. If only he knew he was handing me over to someone who'd been lying to me for months. You look incredible, David whispered, and for a moment, he seemed to forget he was in love with someone else. There was genuine admiration in his eyes, which somehow made everything worse. I smiled at him, the same loving smile I'd been giving him for 2 years. Thank you. Maya stepped closer, adjusting my train and whispering, Everything's perfect. You're going to remember this moment forever. She was right about that, just not in the way she meant. The minister began the ceremony with traditional words about love and commitment, about the sacred bond between husband and wife. The irony was almost unbearable. Here we were, surrounded by people celebrating love and fidelity, while the groom and maid of honor were secretly planning to betray everything those words represented. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, the minister continued, but reverently, discreetly, advisedly, and in the fear of God. I glanced at David, wondering if he felt any shame about what he was doing, but he was looking straight ahead, focused on getting through the ceremony, without revealing anything. When it came time for vows, the minister turned to David first. David, do you take Rachel to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, forsaking all others. Till death do you part? I do, David said clearly, his voice carrying across the silent church. The lie was so smooth, so convincing, that I almost admired his acting ability. He was promising to forsake all others while planning to continue his relationship with the woman standing 3 feet away. Then it was my turn. The minister smiled at me kindly, completely unaware he was about to witness something unprecedented in his 30 years of performing ceremonies. Rachel, do you take David to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, forsaking all others, till death do you part. I looked out at the congregation, all those expectant faces, all those people who loved me and wanted me to be happy. Then I looked at David, whose expression was starting to show confusion at my hesitation. Finally, I glanced at Maya, who was watching me with growing concern. Actually, I said, my voice clear and carrying easily through the church's excellent acoustics, I have something I need to say first. A confused murmur rippled through the congregation. The minister looked puzzled. David's face went pale. Maya whispered urgently, Rachel, what are you doing? I turned to face the congregation fully, my wedding dress rustling as I moved. Every eye in the church was fixed on me, waiting to see what the bride could possibly have to say that couldn't wait until after the ceremony. I want to talk about love, I began, my voice steady and strong. Real love. The kind that's honest and faithful and true. The kind that doesn't sneak around behind closed doors or lie to the people who trust you most. The murmur grew louder. David's face had gone from pale to ashen. Maya was staring at me with growing horror, finally understanding what was happening. You see, I discovered something interesting this week, I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent church. I learned that my fiancé and my maid of honor have been having an affair for the past 3 months. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that packed church. Then, all at once, everyone started talking. Gasps of shock, whispered questions, confused exclamations. Rachel, what are you doing? David hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled away from him and continued speaking to the congregation. They've been meeting in secret, telling me elaborate lies about work meetings and family emergencies, all so they could be together. They plan to go through with this wedding and continue their affair afterward. That's not, Maya started, but I cut her off. Oh, but it is true. And I have proof. I reached into my bouquet, where I'd hidden my phone, and held it up. At exactly 4:15, which should be right about now, many of you are receiving links to a digital photo album. But instead of wedding pictures, you're going to see screenshots of their text messages, photos of them together, and a complete timeline of their 3-month affair. Phones started buzzing throughout the church as the delayed messages arrived. I watched as people checked their notifications, opened the links, and saw the evidence I'd compiled. The gasps grew louder, and several people stood up to get a better look at their screens. Oh my God, someone whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. It's all here. The messages, the photos, everything. David's mother stood up from her seat in the front row, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. David Michael Thompson, how could you do this? Maya's father was scrolling through his phone with an expression of pure disgust. Maya Elizabeth, is this true? I can explain, Maya started, but her voice was drowned out by the growing chaos. People were standing up, showing their phones to neighbors, pointing at David and Maya with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. The wedding coordinator looked like she was having a panic attack. The photographer was still taking pictures, probably out of professional instinct. This is insane, David said, his voice cracking. Rachel, we need to talk about this privately. Privately? I laughed, and it came out sharper than intended. You mean the way you and Maya have been talking privately for 3 months? The way you privately decided to use my wedding as cover for your affair? No, David. I'm done with private conversations. I turned back to the congregation, many still staring at their phones in disbelief. I want everyone here to understand what happened. These 2 people, who I trusted more than anyone in the world, systematically lied to me for months. They made me complicit in my own humiliation. They were going to let me marry a man who was in love with someone else, then continue their relationship behind my back. Rachel, please, Maya said, tears streaming down her face. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me, I said, looking directly at her. Every time you canceled our plans to be with him, every time you helped me plan a wedding you knew was a sham, every time you looked me in the eye and lied to my face, the church had erupted into complete chaos. David's groomsmen were standing around looking uncomfortable and confused. Maya's sister was crying. Both sets of parents were having heated discussions with their respective children. I calmly removed my engagement ring and wedding band, the ones that had cost David 3 months' salary, and placed them on the altar. I won't be needing these anymore. Then I started walking back down the aisle, my wedding dress trailing behind me. The congregation parted like the Red Sea, everyone staring as I made my way toward the exit. Some people were still looking at their phones, others were calling out questions, but I kept walking. As I reached the back of the church, I turned around one last time to look at the scene I was leaving behind. David was standing at the altar looking lost and humiliated, his carefully constructed facade finally shattered. Maya was sobbing into her hands, surrounded by angry family members demanding explanations. The beautiful wedding ceremony had turned into exactly what they deserved, a public reckoning for their choices. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By Sunday morning, less than 24 hours after my wedding that wasn't, the story had spread through our entire social circle like wildfire. Everyone who'd witnessed the scene had called someone who hadn't been there. Everyone who'd received the digital evidence had shared it with friends and family who needed context. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls and messages, so I turned it off and checked into a hotel under my maiden name. I needed silence to process what I'd done and what came next. But even in my self-imposed isolation, news filtered through. My sister called the hotel directly to fill me in on the chaos I'd left behind. David's family is mortified, she told me. His mother hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. She called Mom to apologize for his behavior and to say that they're cutting him off completely. I felt a stab of guilt about David's mother. She was a kind woman who didn't deserve to be humiliated by her son's choices. But then I reminded myself that I wasn't the one who'd made those choices. What about his job? I asked. His boss was at the wedding, saw everything. Apparently, David had been lying about work meetings to cover his affair, and his boss is not happy about being made an unwitting accomplice. There are rumors he might be fired. David's company had a strict policy about integrity and honesty, especially for someone in his position handling client accounts. If they discovered he'd been systematically lying about his whereabouts and using work as an excuse for personal betrayals, his career would be over. And Maya? Her parents are devastated. Her father called her a disgrace to the family name. Her mother packed up all the photos of you two and threw them away. They're talking about not paying for her apartment anymore since they don't trust her judgment. Maya had always been close to her parents, and their financial support had allowed her to live in the trendy downtown apartment she loved. Without it, she'd have to move back home or find roommates, a humbling change for someone who'd prided herself on her independence. Her job situation is even worse, my sister continued. Her boss was also at the wedding, and half her coworkers saw the evidence on their phones. Apparently, she'd been calling in sick and leaving early for months to meet David, and now everyone knows she was lying. Maya worked for a small marketing firm where reputation and trustworthiness were everything. If her colleagues and clients couldn't trust her to be honest about basic things like sick days, how could they trust her with their accounts? The whole thing has become this massive scandal, my sister said. People are taking sides, cutting ties, reevaluating their own relationships. It's like you dropped a bomb in the middle of our social circle. And I had. By choosing to expose David and Maya so publicly, I'd forced everyone who knew us to confront uncomfortable questions about loyalty, honesty, and complicity. Friends who'd covered for them or failed to notice the signs were now questioning their own judgment. Family members who'd supported the relationship were feeling betrayed and foolish. Mom and Dad are worried about you, my sister added gently. They're proud of you for standing up for yourself, but they're concerned about the way you did it. I understood their concern. The Rachel they knew had always been diplomatic, always tried to handle conflicts privately, always avoided making scenes, but that Rachel had also let herself be systematically deceived for months. Tell them I'm okay, I said. Better than okay, actually. For the first time in months, I feel like myself again. Over the next few days, the ripple effects continued to spread. Mutual friends were forced to choose sides, and most chose mine. The evidence I'd compiled was too damning to ignore or rationalize away. David and Maya had betrayed not just me, but everyone who'd supported our relationship and helped plan our wedding. Maya's best friend from work called to apologize for not noticing the signs and to tell me she was ending their friendship. David's college roommate sent a message saying he was embarrassed to have been associated with someone capable of such deception. But the most satisfying response came from an unexpected source. David's ex-girlfriend from college, a woman named Jennifer, who'd always seemed to dislike me for no reason I could understand. I need to tell you something, she said when she called. David cheated on me too, with a close friend of mine. I never said anything because I thought you were different, that maybe he'd changed. But seeing what happened at your wedding, I realized he's exactly the same person he always was. As the week progressed, I started to see the broader impact of my actions. David and Maya weren't just dealing with personal consequences. They'd become a cautionary tale about the dangers of betrayal and deception. 2 weeks after the wedding, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I was going to take that honeymoon trip to Europe, alone. David and I had spent months planning a 2-week tour through Italy, France, and Spain. The flights were paid for, the hotels were booked, and the itinerary was perfect. Why should his betrayal cost me the chance to see the world? Are you sure about this? My mother asked when I told her my plan. Traveling alone so soon after everything? I'm sure, I said, and I was. I've been taking care of everyone else's feelings for weeks. Now I want to take care of mine. The truth was, I needed to get away from the constant reminders of what had happened. Every restaurant in town held memories of David. Every coffee shop reminded me of Maya. I needed distance, perspective, and the chance to remember who I was outside of those relationships. I started a travel blog the day before I left, deciding to document my journey of self-discovery. I called it Finding Me, a Solo Adventure After Betrayal. And my first post was simply, "They broke my heart, but they won't break my spirit. Off to rediscover the world and myself." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, I had hundreds of comments from women sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival. Messages poured in from strangers who'd heard about my wedding day confrontation and wanted to express their support. "You're my hero," wrote one woman. "I caught my husband cheating with my sister, but I was too scared to say anything. Watching you stand up for yourself gives me hope that I can find that courage too." Another message read, "I've been in a toxic relationship for 3 years, making excuses for his behavior and believing his lies. Your story made me realize I deserve better. I realized I'd accidentally become a symbol of something bigger than my own situation." Women who'd been betrayed, gaslit, or taken for granted were seeing my story as proof that they didn't have to accept treatment they didn't deserve. The trip itself was transformative in ways I hadn't expected. In Rome, I spent hours wandering through ancient ruins, marveling at civilizations that had risen and fallen long before my problems existed. In the Colosseum, I thought about gladiators who'd faced life-or-death struggles that put my relationship drama into perspective. In Florence, I took an art class and discovered I had a talent for watercolor painting that I'd never explored. For years, I'd been so focused on David's interests and Maya's social calendar that I'd forgotten to pursue my own passions. "You have a natural eye for color and composition," the instructor told me after my first lesson. "Have you ever considered taking this more seriously?" I hadn't, but suddenly the idea seemed appealing. I spent the rest of my time in Florence painting everything that caught my eye. Street musicians, market vendors, the view from my hotel window. Each painting felt like a small act of reclaiming myself. In Paris, I sat in cafes for hours, people watching and writing in the journal I'd started keeping. I wrote about the relief of making decisions without consulting anyone else, about the joy of eating whatever I wanted without worrying if David would approve, about the freedom of following my own schedule without accommodating Maya's plans. "Today, I realized I haven't felt guilty about anything in 3 days," I wrote. "I haven't apologized for taking up space, haven't worried about being too demanding or too emotional. I'm just existing as myself, and it feels revolutionary." The blog posts I wrote from the road struck a chord with readers around the world. I shared photos of my terrible first attempts at watercolor, stories about getting lost in foreign cities and finding unexpected adventures, reflections on learning to enjoy my own company. Self-discovery isn't just about finding new hobbies or visiting new places, I wrote from a cafe in Barcelona. It's about remembering that you're a complete person on your own, not half of a couple waiting to be completed by someone else. The comments and messages continued to pour in. Women started sharing their own solo travel photos, their own stories of leaving toxic relationships, their own journeys toward self-respect and independence. Without meaning to, I'd created a community of people supporting each other through difficult transitions. But the most meaningful moment came during my last night in Spain. I was sitting on a beach in Barcelona, watching the sunset and reflecting on how much I'd changed in just 2 weeks, when my phone rang. 6 months after my European trip, both David and Maya finally reached out, though for very different reasons. David's message came first, through email since I'd blocked his number. The subject line read, "Please read this. I need to explain." I almost deleted it without opening it. But something made me curious about what he could possibly have to say after all this time. The email was long and rambling, full of justifications and self-pity. He'd lost his job just as my sister had predicted. His family had cut him off financially and emotionally. He was living in a studio apartment on the other side of town, working at a car dealership for a fraction of his previous salary. "I know I hurt you," he wrote, "but I never meant for things to go as far as they did. Maya and I, It was just physical at first. I thought I could control it, keep it separate from what we had. But then I fell in love with her, and I didn't know how to handle it. He went on to explain that Maya had ended their relationship immediately after the wedding, unable to handle the guilt and social fallout. He'd been trying to win her back ever since, but she'd made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him. I realize now that what we had was real, he continued. You were the best thing in my life, and I threw it away for something that was never going to last. I'm not asking for another chance. I know I don't deserve one, but I need you to know that I'm sorry, and that losing you was the biggest mistake I'll ever make. The email ended with a request to meet in person so he could apologize face to face. I need closure, he wrote, and maybe you do too. I stared at the email for a long time, trying to figure out how I felt about it. A year ago, this kind of message might have broken my heart all over again. But now, after months of therapy and personal growth, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. David hadn't learned anything from what had happened. He was still making excuses, still treating me like a fallback option, still thinking about what he needed rather than what he'd put me through. The fact that he'd only reached out after Maya rejected him told me everything I needed to know about his motivations. Maya's approach was different. She called my sister and asked her to pass along a message. She wanted to meet for coffee, not to ask for forgiveness, but to take responsibility for what she'd done. When we finally sat across from each other at a quiet cafe downtown, I was struck by how different she looked. The confident, polished woman I'd known for 8 years seemed smaller somehow, more fragile. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't fully hide. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said without preamble. I don't even expect you to listen to what I have to say, but I needed to try. Unlike David's rambling email, Maya's apology was direct and honest. She didn't make excuses or try to minimize what she'd done. She didn't blame David or claim she'd been manipulated. She took full responsibility for her choices. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I helped you plan a wedding I knew was a lie. I watched you struggle with doubts and convinced you to ignore them because it served my purposes. I stole 3 months of your life by letting you believe in something that wasn't real. She told me about the guilt that had been eating at her since the affair began, how she'd tried to end it multiple times but couldn't resist the intoxication of forbidden love, how she'd convinced herself that what I didn't know wouldn't hurt me, that she could have both the affair and our friendship. The worst part, she said, tears streaming down her face, is that I genuinely loved you. You were my best friend, and I chose to destroy that for a man who dropped me the second things got complicated. She was right about that last part. According to my sister's sources, David had indeed abandoned Maya as soon as their relationship became public and costly. When she needed support dealing with the social fallout, he'd made it clear that their affair had been about excitement and secrecy, not about building a real relationship under pressure. I lost everything, Maya continued. My job, my apartment, my relationship with my parents, most of my friends, but I deserve to lose it all. What I can't stand is knowing that I hurt you in the process. She slid an envelope across the table. I wrote you a letter every week for the past 6 months, trying to find the right words to express how sorry I am. I never sent them, but I brought them all here. You don't have to read them, but I wanted you to know how much time I've spent thinking about what I did to you. 2 years after the wedding that never was, I stood in front of another church, this time as a speaker, not a bride. The Women's Empowerment Conference had drawn over 300 attendees, and I was the keynote speaker, sharing my story of betrayal and recovery with women from across the country. 2 years ago, I began, looking out at the sea of faces. I thought my life was over when I discovered my fiancé and best friend were having an affair. I thought their betrayal defined me, that I'd never trust again, never love again, never be whole again. I was wrong about all of that. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. In the front row, I spotted a young woman who looked exactly like I had 2 years ago, devastated, hollow-eyed, wearing the expression of someone whose world had just collapsed. The worst betrayal of my life became the catalyst for the best version of myself, I continued. Not because betrayal is good, it's not, but because it forced me to stop settling for less than I deserved and start building a life that reflected my actual worth. After my speech, the young woman from the front row approached me. Her name was Jessica, and her story was heartbreakingly familiar. A fiancé who'd been cheating with her roommate, a wedding planned for next month, a discovery that had shattered everything she thought she knew about love. I don't know how to do what you did, she said through tears. I don't know how to be that strong. You don't have to expose them publicly like I did, I told her. That was my choice for my situation. But you do have to choose yourself. You have to decide that your dignity and self-respect matter more than avoiding uncomfortable conversations or disappointing people who enabled their behavior. My personal life had flourished too, in ways I never could have imagined. 6 months ago, I'd met Marcus at a coffee shop in Portland while I was there for a speaking engagement. He was a photographer covering the event for a local magazine, and we'd started talking about the transformative power of art after trauma. Marcus was everything David hadn't been: emotionally available, completely honest about his feelings and intentions, supportive of my work rather than threatened by it. He'd been through his own difficult divorce and understood the importance of building trust slowly and intentionally. I love that you refuse to make yourself smaller for anyone, he told me on our third date. You take up exactly the amount of space you deserve, and you expect people to treat you accordingly. It's incredibly attractive. We'd been together for 6 months now, and every day felt like evidence that healthy love was possible after betrayal. We communicated openly about our fears and boundaries. We maintained our individual interests and friendships. We supported each other's goals without losing ourselves in the relationship. Most importantly, Marcus had met me after I'd done the work to heal. He fell in love with the strong, confident woman I'd become, not the people-pleasing version of myself that had attracted David. As for David and Maya, their lives had taken very different paths. David never recovered from the professional and social consequences of the affair. After losing his job, he'd struggled to find similar work. Our industry was small, and word of his dishonesty had spread quickly. He'd eventually moved to another state to start over, working in a completely different field for much less money. According to mutual friends, he'd dated sporadically, but never found anything serious. Several women had looked him up online after early dates and discovered the story of our wedding, deciding they didn't want to risk involvement with someone capable of such calculated deception. Maya's journey had been more complex. The initial fallout had been devastating: lost job, damaged family relationships, social ostracism. But unlike David, she'd used the experience as motivation for genuine change. She'd entered therapy immediately after our coffee meeting, working to understand why she'd been capable of betraying someone she genuinely loved. After 18 months of intensive therapy, she'd started volunteering at the crisis center where I spoke regularly. She'd also returned to school to get certified as a professional counselor, planning to dedicate her career to helping women navigate complex relationship dynamics. Last month, I'd received an unexpected piece of mail: a wedding invitation from Maya. She was marrying someone I'd never heard of, a man she'd met in therapy who understood her past and supported her growth. The invitation included a handwritten note. I know you won't come, and I'm not asking you to, but I wanted you to know that the woman who's getting married next month is someone you would be proud to know, someone who learned how to choose love over self-interest, honesty over convenience, growth over comfort. I became that woman because you showed me what strength looks like. I didn't go to the wedding, but I was genuinely happy for her. Her journey from betrayal to accountability to healing had been as transformative as my own, just in a different direction. Standing in my garden that evening, watching the sun set over the flowers I'd planted in the home I'd bought with money I'd saved from my book and speaking fees, I marveled at the unexpected shape my life had taken. 2 years ago, I'd thought happiness meant finding someone to complete me. Now I understood that it meant becoming someone I was proud to be, regardless of whether I was alone or in a relationship. It meant using my voice, setting boundaries, refusing to settle for treatment I didn't deserve. The garden was coming along beautifully: roses and lilies and baby's breath, the same flowers that had decorated the church where my old life ended and my real life began. But these flowers were mine, planted by my own hands in soil I'd prepared myself, growing strong because I'd given them exactly what they needed to thrive, just like me.
I drove a domestic car to attend a high school reunion. When I arrived at the hotel, most of my classmates were already there. They were all doing quite well, driving either Mercedes or BMWs, and there was even a black Rolls-Royce. As soon as I got out of the car, a female classmate, whose name I couldn't remember, looked at me with total disdain. "Oh, isn't this our class's study committee member? How did you end up like this after graduation, still driving a domestic car?" During the meal, everyone eagerly toasted the Rolls-Royce owner, completely ignoring me. Only the class leader sat beside me with a glass of wine, offering comfort. "It's okay. Even though your car isn't as good as theirs, I believe that one day you'll drive a luxury car too." The corners of my mouth lifted slightly as I softly replied, "This isn't just any ordinary domestic car. Its name is Phantom S9. If it weren't for the class leader sending me message after message, I wouldn't have had the time to attend the reunion. Out of respect for old friendships, I canceled an important meeting and managed to free up just an hour. But to my surprise, there wasn't a single conversation about our youth at the table. It was all bragging and flattery. I didn't like the atmosphere, so I got up, ready to leave. Seeing this, the class leader immediately reached out to stop me. "Fernando, there's nothing shameful about driving a domestic car. Don't be in such a rush to leave," the class leader said. Just as I was about to reply, the same female classmate who mocked me earlier shot me another disdainful glance. Exactly. It's been so many years since we've seen each other. Don't you want to catch up with everyone? But judging by the looks of it, it seems no one's really eager to talk to you. In the end, she burst out laughing. I looked up at her and spoke coldly. "No need. I only came this time out of respect for the class leader. In the future, don't bother inviting me to such pointless gatherings." As soon as I finished speaking, Raphael, who was surrounded by everyone like the center of attention, suddenly stood up. "Fernando, what do you mean by that? Are you saying we're not worthy of dining together?" He had clearly twisted the meaning of my words on purpose. But the people around didn't see it that way. "Oh, driving a cheap domestic car and still looking down on others? Before coming, I thought top students like you were something amazing. But it turns out you're nothing special. What's the use of good grades? After graduation, you still ended up as just a civil servant." A civil servant? Well, she was not entirely wrong. All public officials in the country could indeed be classified as civil servants. "Fernando, I think you're just upset because you feel ignored and now you're making excuses to leave. People are naturally divided into different ranks. So what if your grades are great? In the end, you're still just a lowly civil servant." I just wanted to leave this place quickly, but Raphael's comment unexpectedly stirred up collective anger. "Everyone, I truly apologize for today, but I have an important meeting to attend shortly." "Well, today's meal is on me. Feel free to eat and drink whatever you like. Just have the restaurant send me the invoice later." As I reached out to grab my coat, a seductive figure blocked my path. "Oh, acting like a big shot when you don't have the money? This meal will cost at least thousands of dollars. Can you even afford it with that measly salary of yours?" She was dressed in a fiery red dress, her lipstick just as strikingly bright. But the overwhelming scent of perfume was unbearable, and I couldn't help but sneeze several times in a row. "Fernando, what's with that look in your eyes? Don't you remember me?" I carefully studied her for a moment before shaking my head. "Sorry, I met too many people over the past few years. I guess I'm bad at remembering faces." The truth was I had absolutely no idea who she was. She raised an eyebrow and let out a mocking laugh, saying, "Fernando, don't play this whole hard-to-get act with me. You chased me for 3 whole years back in high school." The moment she finished speaking, a familiar image surfaced in my mind. Still, the woman in front of me was far different from how she looked in high school. I hesitated for a moment before asking cautiously, "Are you Mariana?" As soon as I said her name, a triumphant look spread across her face. "So many years have passed, yet you still haven't forgotten me." Halfway through her sentence, she suddenly changed her tone. "But I need to warn you, don't get any inappropriate ideas about me. I'm engaged now, and my fiancé is none other than Raphael." Raphael? The name sounded somewhat familiar. Wasn't he the owner of the Rolls-Royce at the entrance? Is still? What did any of this have to do with me? There was still a large group of people waiting for me in the conference room to start the meeting. If I didn't leave soon, I was going to be late. Seeing me remain silent, Mariana lightly patted me with her manicured hand. "Civil servants don't make much money. How about you drive for my fiancé instead? I'll have him pay you $1,000 a month. That's got to be better than your measly salary." As soon as she finished speaking, the crowd burst into laughter. I couldn't understand it. Why did people like them always feel the need to humiliate others just to elevate themselves? This would be my last time attending such a class reunion. I ignored Mariana's mockery and casually grabbed my coat, putting it on. "Are you done? If so, step aside. I have things to do." I had barely taken a few steps when Raphael, who was sitting across from me, suddenly slammed his hand on the table. Immediately, a dozen or so burly men in black suits rushed into the room. I noticed the nameplates on their chests. Fitzroy Group. It was a well-known industry leader in Langston City. Raphael downed a drink in his glass in one go, then burped. "Fernando, did I say you could leave?" I couldn't help but narrow my eyes. "My legs are attached to my body. Do I need to report to you about where I'm going?" Raphael burst into laughter after hearing my words. "You're just a lowly civil servant. Don't you realize whose turf you're on? The whole restaurant is owned by my family. Don't you think you need my permission to leave? You're not walking out that door today. The class leader sensed the tension and immediately stepped in, saying a few polite words to ease the situation. Hey, both of you calm down. We've been classmates for over a decade. No need to let something so small ruin the mood. Halfway through, the class leader suddenly turned to me. Fernando, come on. We've finally all gathered together. How can you just leave early? Sit back down, let's have a drink, and catch up properly. I knew the class leader was trying to smooth things over for me, but my time was really running out. Sorry, I know I'm ruining the mood, but I truly have something important to take care of. There's a whole group of people in the office waiting for me to get back for a meeting. I had barely finished speaking when Rafael slammed the table again. Fernando, cut the act. You're just a low-level civil servant. What kind of meeting could you possibly have to attend? So you're saying a whole group of people is waiting for you? Do you really think you're some kind of leader now? I was being polite calling you a civil servant. Without that, you're just another lousy worker. Got it? I was just about to retort when the class leader quickly grabbed my hand, whispering a plea. Fernando, I think you'd better apologize to Rafael. The Fitzroy family is a leading enterprise here in Langston City. If you offend him, you might lose your job. Sometimes it's better to just endure. Rafael could make me lose my job. If I hadn't stayed sober today, I might have thought I was drunk. Given my current rank, the only way to remove me from my position would be through a direct official order from higher authorities. No matter how wealthy the Fitzroy family might be, even if their wealth rivaled nations, they couldn't possibly have any real influence over me. I gently patted the back of the class leader's hand, signaling him not to worry. Rafael, if your hostility toward me stems from the fact that I once had a crush on your fiancée, then let me make it clear. I have absolutely no interest in Mariana. I suggest you focus your energy elsewhere. You and I are not the same kind of people. I had planned to use this reunion as an opportunity to clear things up and resolve the misunderstanding with Rafael, but it turned out his mind couldn't process things that way. He stared at me with bloodshot eyes. Fernando, from the way you're talking, are you saying I picked up some kind of trash and that my fiancée is a woman even you wouldn't want? Also, what do you mean by you and I aren't the same kind of people? Langston is full of businesses owned by my family. Who do you think you are? As soon as Rafael finished speaking, Mariana immediately stepped forward to back him up. Fernando, what do you mean by that? Do you think I'm no longer good enough for you? Now, you're not leaving here today unless you explain yourself clearly. Although that was indeed what I thought, I bit back the words to save them some dignity. I don't have time to chat with you too. Tell your people to open the door. Despite Rafael's repeated provocations, I didn't get angry. Instead, I chose to back down again and again. After all, this was a class reunion. I didn't want to ruin the mood. But just as I was about to leave, Rafael's bodyguard seized me firmly, blocking my way. Rafael strutted over, exuding arrogance, and slapped my face with force. You really think you're somebody now, huh? Do you even know whose name this hotel carries? Back in school, weren't you the one always tattling on people? Go ahead, make a call. I'd like to see if anyone's still willing to help you now that we're no longer in school. Clenching my teeth, I locked eyes with him. Rafael, this is your last warning. Back in school, you were lazy and useless, always fighting or skipping class. I told the teachers for your own good. Now that you're an adult, remember to think about the consequences before you act. Rafael's eyes scanned the room, surveying our classmates. You all heard that, right? He says I should think about the consequences. Haha. Fernando, even if I ruin you today, what are you going to do about it? Do you really think being a top student makes you a big shot? Before you step out of here, you should have checked just how much weight the Fitzroy family carries in Langston. I slowly lifted my head, holding back my anger with great effort. Rafael, have you ever heard the saying there's always someone bigger, someone stronger? Some people are not to be trifled with. I advise you to let go of me now, or you'll be the one regretting it later, not me. I took a deep breath, keeping my eyes fixed on Rafael. The silence in the room was almost suffocating, but I wouldn't let myself be intimidated. He might have money, power, and even bodyguards to try and pressure me. But at the end of the day, I knew exactly who I was. And Rafael, no matter how much he tried to convince himself otherwise, was nothing more than a spoiled brat who had grown up stepping on people he deemed beneath him. I could feel the eyes of my former classmates on me. Some amused, others just curious to see how far this would go. The class leader, clearly nervous, approached once again, trying to ease the tension. Fernando, just apologize and be done with it. It's not worth turning this into something bigger. I chuckled softly, shaking my head. Apologize? For what? For not wanting to continue this ridiculous reunion? For not bowing down to a spoiled brat who thinks he's some kind of gangster? Raphael smirked arrogantly and slowly clapped his hands. Bravo, Fernando. You really think you're above me, don't you? He then gestured, and the bodyguards blocking my exit took a step forward. Two of them grabbed my arms firmly, but I didn't resist. Not yet. You know, Fernando, there are things money can solve very easily. And at the end of the day, people like you always end up crawling back, begging for an opportunity to work for us. I said nothing. I simply smiled. A cold, humorless smile. Oh, so now you're quiet? Raphael mocked. Maybe because you've finally realized you have no way out. I let out a slow sigh and shrugged, making the two bodyguards tighten their grip. Do you really think you can do whatever you want to me here and get away with it? I muttered to Raphael. He laughed. And who's going to stop me? You? No. The law. Then I played my trump card. Do you even know my position in the government, Raphael? Do you have any idea who I know? Because unlike you, my influence doesn't come from a bank account. You might have money, but you can't erase everything that happens here today. The laughter stopped. I saw some classmates' eyes widen. Raphael blinked a few times, as if trying to process my words. You're bluffing, he spat. Try your luck. The bodyguards hesitated. They clearly weren't comfortable with the situation, which meant Raphael wasn't as untouchable as he thought. You really think you could just walk away from here? Raphael sneered. I can ruin your career with a single phone call. Then do it. He faltered. Call whoever you want, Raphael. Make your threats. But just know that if I want to, by tomorrow you'll be drowning in tax audits, money laundering investigations, and every other shady deal your family has been running without even realizing it. You think you can intimidate me? I am exactly the kind of person you should be afraid of. Silence fell over the room. The bodyguards immediately let go of me. Raphael stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly. Mariana looked between us, confused, as if she couldn't understand how the situation had turned against them so quickly. I adjusted my coat and started walking toward the door. No one tried to stop me anymore. But before leaving, I stopped next to Raphael and murmured just for him to hear. If you lay a finger on me, your family will lose much more than just an expensive dinner. Then, without looking back, I walked out of the room. In the following days, Raphael tried everything to get back at me. He called contacts, tried pulling strings behind the scenes, but nothing worked. I had already anticipated his every move, so I acted first. And within less than a month, the first audits began. It didn't take long for fraud to be uncovered. Shell companies, tax evasion, corruption schemes. The Fitzroy Group started to collapse from the inside. Raphael realized too late that he had messed with the wrong person. The last I heard of him, he was desperately trying to sell properties to cover the fines and avoid prosecution. His arrogance had turned into fear. And Mariana? Well, she disappeared from his life the moment she saw the money wasn't guaranteed anymore. As for me, I moved on. I kept climbing, building my influence the right way without having to step on anyone, and I was never invited to another class reunion again. After that day, I never received another invitation to a class reunion. In fact, I doubt any of them have even mentioned my name since. To them, I became a ghost, someone who existed but was no longer convenient to remember. But for me, that wasn't a problem. If anything, it was a relief. Raphael, on the other hand, watched his life fall apart before his very eyes. The investigations into Fitzroy Group started small, discreet, but as more irregularities surfaced, they snowballed into something unstoppable. It was almost entertaining to watch from a distance as he desperately tried to put out the fire. First, he attempted to bribe the investigators. It didn't work. Then, he tried to leverage his political contacts, only to realize that no one wanted to be associated with a sinking ship. In the end, he was forced to sell off several of his family's businesses just to cover the financial damages and pay the ever-growing fines. The arrogance he flaunted that night at the restaurant gradually faded, replaced by sheer desperation. But the final blow came when his own father, realizing that Raphael was incapable of saving the family empire, disowned him. With no money, no power, and no one left to defend him, Raphael was reduced to an ordinary man. No status, no influence, not even a decent job. The last I heard of him, he was struggling to run a small restaurant, failing miserably. Some people are born for greatness, but Raphael? He was just a spoiled kid who never learned how the real world worked. And Mariana? Well, it was no surprise to anyone that she vanished the moment Raphael's wealth was no longer guaranteed. She tried to attach herself to other businessmen, hoping to maintain the lifestyle she was used to, but soon realized she wasn't as special as she believed. People like her only have value as long as they're an extension of someone powerful, And without Raphael, she was nothing more than an ordinary woman, boring, untalented, and with no real appeal beyond her looks. I heard she tried to marry a middle-aged executive, a divorced man who had little interest in her beyond using her as a trophy. It didn't last long. As soon as he realized she was more of a burden than a benefit, he discarded her. Now, Mariana lives a very different life from what she once envisioned. She works at a luxury boutique, selling clothes to the same wealthy women she once envied and tried to imitate. And perhaps the most ironic part of it all is that if she had stayed with me back then, she could have had everything she ever wanted. The class leader remained the same, always trying to please others, always balancing between sides to avoid fully committing. In the end, he was just a mediocre man, someone who never had the courage to take a stand to make a real decision. He reached out to me once, after everything, trying to justify himself, saying he didn't want to get involved, that he just wanted to keep the peace. I simply looked at him and shook my head. People like him don't deserve respect, only pity. And the others? Most moved on with their lives. Some remained trapped in the cycle of flattery and pretense, while others finally realized that the real world wasn't like high school. But overall, they all followed the same path, desperately trying to maintain appearances, to prove they were successful, wealthy, happy. A fragile illusion held together by the fear of being seen as failures. And me? I moved forward. I built my career, expanded my influence, and achieved everything through my own efforts. Unlike Raphael, I didn't inherit anything. Every achievement, every victory, every bit of recognition was earned through hard work. And that's the difference between us. Sometimes I wonder if any of them still think about me. If Raphael wakes up in the middle of the night, seething with anger, knowing he was the one who orchestrated his own downfall. If Mariana regrets the choices she made. If she looks back and realizes she threw away the only real opportunity she ever had. If the others remember the last time they saw me and now understand that they laughed at the wrong person. But in the end, none of that matters, because I never needed their validation. I never needed the approval of a bunch of shallow people driven by money and status. I am proof that those who truly have value don't need to shout to be noticed. Time always puts everyone in their rightful place. And in their case, there is no worse place than the shadow of their own choices.
I dyed my hair blue so my boss would stop blaming me for the hair found in customers' food. I worked at a family restaurant called Mel's Kitchen, where the owner, Tom, was absolutely convinced that every hair found in the food was mine. It didn't matter that we had about 8 other employees with the same brown hair as mine. No, according to Tom, I was the one shedding hair. The first time it happened, a lady found a long brown hair in her pancakes. Tom immediately approached me in front of the entire kitchen and said, "Emma, you need to wear a hairnet or you're fired." I thought, well, whatever. So I started wearing the ridiculous hairnet every shift. But then it happened again. Every time someone complained about hair in their food, Tom would point at me and threaten to dock my pay. I told him over and over that it wasn't me because, well, I was wearing a hairnet. But he would just shake his head and say I was being careless. The other waiters started looking at me strangely, like I was some kind of health code violator. The breaking point came on a busy Saturday morning. A businessman ordered Eggs Benedict and found not 1, but 3 brown hairs tangled in his hollandaise sauce. He was furious and threatened to call the health department. Tom burst into the kitchen, his face red and sweaty, and yelled at me in front of everyone. "Emma, that's it. 1 more hair complaint and you're gone." I was so frustrated I almost cried right there. I knew for certain those hairs weren't mine because I had it pulled back in a tight bun under that stupid hairnet. But Tom didn't realize this. That's when I noticed something that filled me with rage. Sarah, one of the cooks, was standing right behind the grill with her long brown hair completely loose, not even a ponytail in sight. She wasn't wearing any kind of hair protection. But here's the catch. Tom didn't say a word to her because she was his niece. That night, I went to CVS and bought the brightest blue dye I could find. Like an electric blue, the kind that screams, "Look at me," from across the room. I dyed my entire head in my small apartment bathroom, leaving blue stains all over the sink and probably on my security deposit. Monday morning, I arrived at work looking like a punk. Tom looked at me strangely but didn't say anything. I put on my hairnet as always and got to work. Around lunchtime, an elderly couple ordered the special meatloaf. 10 minutes later, they called me over and there it was. A long brown hair on the mashed potatoes. I just watched, and there it was. A long strand of brown hair on the mashed potatoes. I just watched. My heart raced, but not from nervousness. It was pure adrenaline, the kind you feel when you finally have the proof you've been waiting for months. For the first time since I dyed my hair blue, I had concrete. irrefutable evidence that it had never been my hair in the food. I looked at the elderly couple waiting for a solution. The lady had a disgusted look, pushing the plate aside. The husband shook his head, clearly disappointed. Normally, I would call Tom discreetly. He would come to the table, humiliate me in front of the customers, and I would swallow it once again. But today would be different. I felt my hands trembling, not from fear, but from anticipation. I took the plate carefully, as if it were precious criminal evidence, because that's exactly what it represented, proof of my innocence and the systematic hypocrisy I had been suffering. I walked slowly toward the counter, where Tom was reviewing some orders. I realized the other employees noticed something different in my posture. Maria, the oldest waitress, looked at me with curiosity. Carlos, the cook, looked up from the grill. And Sarah? Sarah was there, working on the griddle with her brown hair swaying freely, without any concern for hygiene. She didn't even notice what was about to happen. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Months of public humiliation, months of being treated like a problematic employee, months of having my competence questioned for something I had never done. All of that was about to end. I stopped right in the center of the dining room, where all the customers could see and hear me. The restaurant was full for Monday lunch. Perfect. More witnesses. Better. Tom, I shouted, with a calm voice but loud enough for half the customers to hear. I need you to come here and solve one more of my hair problems in the food. He approached with that arrogant confidence as always, already preparing the usual speech. I could see in his eyes that he was ready for one more public humiliation of irresponsible Emma. Let me guess, he said loudly so customers could hear. You forgot to tie your hair properly again? That's when I made the move that would change everything. Dramatically, with very slow and deliberate gestures, I removed my cap. My electric blue hair fell over my shoulders like a cascade of rebellion. The silence that followed was deafening. Tom literally stood there with his mouth open. Some customers dropped their forks. Even the background music seemed to stop. I pointed to the brown strand on the plate, maintaining eye contact with Tom. Explain to me how my brown hair is in this food. Tom. His face went from red to white in seconds. He opened and closed his mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Customers began murmuring among themselves, some taking out their phones to film the unfolding drama. I'm waiting, I continued, keeping my voice calm but firm. How is it that my blue hair turned brown on this plate? That's when Sarah finally realized what was happening. She looked at me, then at Tom, then at her own loose hair, and in a desperate attempt to go unnoticed, began looking for a cap. But it was too late. Are you all seeing this? I announced to the entire restaurant, turning to show my blue hair to all the customers. For months I've been blamed for something I never did. Now you're all witnesses to the truth. Tom was still stuttering, trying to find an explanation. Well, maybe it's from before, when I still what? Tom, I interrupted. When my hair was still brown? That was 3 weeks ago. Are you telling me that a strand of hair was wandering around the kitchen for 3 weeks until it landed on this couple's plate? The customers' murmurs grew louder. Some people laughed. Others expressed indignation. I was winning the audience. I took out my phone and started recording everything. People, you won't believe what I'm about to show you. I started a live stream on Instagram. My name is Emma, and for months I was publicly humiliated by my boss, who blamed me for all the hair found in customers' food. I showed my blue hair to the camera, then the brown strand on the plate, and then Tom, still completely lost. This is Tom, my boss, who still hasn't been able to explain to me how my blue hair turned brown on this plate. Views began to increase rapidly. Supportive comments started appearing. Go, Emma! Expose that abusive boss. Justice for the blue-haired girl. Customers began getting up and leaving without paying. Some expressed disgust at the sanitary conditions. One woman said loudly, if they don't even know where the hair in the food comes from, imagine what else could be wrong here. And this, I continued, turning the camera towards Sarah, who was trying to hide behind the griddle, is Sarah, Tom's niece, who has been working without a cap for months while I was humiliated daily. The video already had hundreds of views, and comments kept coming. Hashtags began appearing. Dr. Blue Hair Justice. Dr. Justice for Emma. Dr. Trash, Toxic Restaurant. Tom finally tried to take control of the situation. Emma, stop this now or you're fired. I laughed. I literally laughed in his face. Fire me? Tom, you just lost half your customers. Look around. And it was true. The restaurant was emptying. People were paying their bills quickly and leaving. Some didn't even bother to pay. Besides, I continued, still recording, Do you really want to fire me in front of thousands of people watching live? Because that would be an excellent way to make this situation even worse for you. Maria, the oldest waitress, approached me. Emma, can I say something? She looked at the camera. I've worked here for 5 years, and I always knew those hairs weren't Emma's. But Tom never wanted to listen. Carlos, the cook, also joined us. It's true. Tom forbade me from complaining about Sarah's practices. He said if I continued bothering her, I would be fired. The revolt was spreading. Other employees began approaching, each with their own stories of abuse and favoritism. What started as my personal revenge was transforming into a complete exposure of the restaurant's abusive practices. Tom realized he was losing control. "You're all fired," he shouted. "All of you." "Perfect," I replied. "Because then you can explain to your remaining customers, if there are any left, how the restaurant is going to function without employees." The video continued gaining traction. Local influencers started sharing. Food critics in the city expressed horror in the comments. Local media began sending messages asking for interviews. In less than an hour, I had gone from humiliated employee to local celebrity. And Tom? Tom was discovering that his actions had consequences. Consequences he never imagined could come from someone he considered insignificant. But that was just the beginning. What I didn't know was that a local investigative journalist was among the viewers of the live stream, and she was very interested in learning more about the labor practices at Mel's Kitchen. 2 hours later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Support messages were coming in by the thousands. People were sharing their own stories of abusive bosses. The video had gone viral, not just locally, but nationally. Rebecca Martinez from KQED News was the first journalist to call me. "Emma, I saw your live stream. I'd like to do a deeper report on what you experienced at the restaurant. Can I come see you?" I accepted immediately. It was no longer just about me. It was about all the employees who suffer silent abuse every day. We met at a cafe near my house. Rebecca had that serious investigative journalist air, but also a genuine kindness that made me feel comfortable telling everything. "Tell me about the pattern of behavior," she said, recording our conversation. "Was it always like this with other employees?" "Always," I replied. But with me it was worse because I questioned. Tom hated when I tried to defend myself. There were days when he would humiliate me in front of customers just to show who was in charge. I showed her months of documentation I had saved, text messages where Tom threatened to dock my pay, photos of when I came home crying after an especially difficult day, even some audio recordings I had discreetly made during the humiliations. "Did you know this could bring legal trouble for him?" Rebecca asked, flipping through my notes. I suspected, but I didn't know what to do. I need the job, you know? Or needed. Now I don't even know if I still have work. Rebecca laughed. From what I saw in the video, I think that's the least of your worries now. She told me she had already interviewed 3 former restaurant employees who confirmed the pattern of abuse. They all had similar stories: favoritism for Sarah, public humiliation for anyone who questioned, and constant threats of firing. "There's more," she said. "I received an anonymous tip that the restaurant has serious problems with health surveillance. Apparently, it's not just the hair issue." My stomach turned. "What kind of problems?" "Improper food temperatures, falsified cleaning records, safety equipment in terrible condition. The person who contacted me says Tom instructed employees to lie during inspections." That made me remember several strange situations I had witnessed. Times when Tom hastily cleaned the kitchen area when someone from outside arrived. Times when he asked me to store certain things in the freezer, just for today. "I can give you more details about that," I said. I documented some things that seemed strange, but at the time I didn't know they were so serious. Rebecca smiled. "Emma, you may not realize it, but you built a solid case against your former boss. This goes far beyond a viral video." The next day, the report aired. It was a 15-minute investigation into abusive practices in family restaurants, using Mel's Kitchen as a case study. Testimonies from former employees, analysis by labor law specialists, and even an interview with a health surveillance inspector explaining the risks of the practices I had documented. Tom tried to do damage control, giving a disastrous interview where he called everything a misunderstanding and said I was a problematic employee who distorted the situation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The most incredible thing was the public reaction. People began canceling reservations, suppliers canceled contracts, and even the mall where the restaurant was located issued a statement saying they were evaluating the situation. Sarah also tried to defend herself on social media, posting a video where she cried and said she never wanted to harm anyone. But the comments were devastating. People weren't interested in apologies. They wanted accountability. That's when I received the call that would change everything. Dr. Patricia Vance, a lawyer specializing in labor law, had seen the report and wanted to talk to me. "Emma, you have a very strong case for moral harassment, discrimination, and creating a hostile work environment," she said during our consultation. "With the evidence you have, especially the recordings and colleague testimonies, this could be an exemplary case." "Exemplary how?" I asked. "The kind that changes legislation. The kind that makes other employers think twice before treating employees like Tom treated you." That same week, we filed the lawsuit. The repercussion was immediate. Labor rights organizations got in touch offering support. Universities wanted to study the case. Even politicians began using my story in speeches about labor law reform. Tom, desperate, tried to call me several times. He left messages on my phone begging to resolve this without lawyers. But I wasn't interested in negotiations. The pressure on him increased when health surveillance conducted a surprise inspection. They found exactly what Rebecca had reported: multiple violations, falsified records, and Sarah working without protective equipment. The restaurant was temporarily closed and the fines were heavy. Tom couldn't explain to inspectors why only I was required to wear protective equipment while other employees, especially Sarah, had different rules. Mel's Kitchen became synonymous with poor management and labor abuse. Memes were created. Business administration students used the case as an example of what not to do. The restaurant that was once a neighborhood landmark was now a symbol of everything wrong with employee treatment in small businesses. But for me, the greatest satisfaction came when I received a message from a young woman in another city. "Emma, I saw your story and decided to report my boss who does similar things. Thank you for giving me courage." That's what it was all about from the beginning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. It was about showing that people like Tom can't continue abusing employees just because they think they can. 6 months later, I was in court. The atmosphere was solemn. Different from the chaos of that day at the restaurant, Tom was sitting at the defense table, visibly dejected. He was no longer the arrogant man who publicly humiliated me. Dr. Patricia presented our case meticulously. The viral recordings, colleague testimonies, media coverage, everything formed a clear picture of systematic abuse. "Your Honor," she said, "this is not just a case of workplace conflict. It's about how a toxic work environment can devastate a person's life, and how small businesses can abuse vulnerable employees." Tom's defense tried to argue that they were misunderstandings and that my reaction was disproportionate. But when my lawyer presented the evidence, months of documentation, testimonies from multiple employees, and even the health surveillance report, it became clear there was no way to deny the pattern of abuse. The judge was direct. "Mr. Tom, your actions constitute systematic moral harassment. The intentional creation of a hostile work environment for a specific employee is unacceptable in any business context." I won the case. The compensation was substantial, enough to compensate not only material damages, but especially moral damages. The judge specifically cited the case as an example of how apparently small behaviors can have devastating impacts on employees' lives. Tom was forced to sell his house to pay the compensation and health surveillance fines. The restaurant never reopened. Sarah got a job elsewhere, but her reputation was also tarnished by association with the case. But the legal victory was only part of the story. What really mattered was what I did with it. I used part of the compensation to realize a dream I didn't even know I had: opening my own business. Blue Hair Snacks started as a simple food truck, but became an instant success. It wasn't just because I had become famous, though that helped. It was because I really cared about every detail. Every employee was treated with respect. Every customer received not just good food, but also an environment where they felt welcome. I hired Maria, Carlos, and other former Mel's Kitchen employees. We created a work environment where no one was afraid to give opinions, where everyone wore the same protective equipment, where favoritism didn't exist. "I never thought working could be like this," Maria told me one day, as we cleaned the food truck at the end of the shift. Without fear, without constant tension, the food truck became more than a business. It became a symbol. People came not just for the food, but for what we represented. Employees from other restaurants would stop by to tell their own stories of abuse and ask for advice. I began giving lectures on labor rights at culinary and business schools. I always started by telling my story, showing how an apparently simple situation, hair and food, can hide years of systematic abuse. Dignity at work is not a luxury, I would tell audiences. It's a basic right. And when that right is violated, we have to have the courage to defend ourselves. Universities began using my case as a study, not just about labor rights, but about how social media can be used to expose injustices and create real change. 1 year after the legal victory, I received an email that made me cry. It was from a young woman named Lisa, who worked at a restaurant in another state. Emma, my boss, did similar things to me. He blamed me for problems that weren't mine, humiliated me in front of customers. After seeing your story, I recorded some situations and also sued him. I won. I wanted to thank you for giving me courage not to accept that treatment. Attached to the email was a photo. Lisa was smiling in front of her own food truck, with a large sticker on the side that said, "Inspired by Blue Hair Emma." That was the real victory. It wasn't the compensation money or momentary fame. It was knowing that my story had inspired other people not to accept abusive treatment. I went back to where Mel's Kitchen used to be a few times. Now it was a successful clothing store. The new owner, a lovely woman named Janet, put a small plaque in the place. Here, the Blue Hair Revolution was born. Emma, thank you for teaching us about dignity at work. Tom, I heard by chance that he was working as a waiter in a neighboring city. Someone said he had changed, that he treated colleagues with respect. Part of me was happy about that. I never wanted to destroy his life. I just wanted him to understand that his actions had consequences. Sarah also learned some lessons. She looked for me one day, almost 2 years after everything had happened. She came to the food truck and asked to talk. "Emma, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness after so long," she said, with tears in her eyes. "But I needed to tell you that it was all my fault. I knew those hairs were mine, but I let them blame you because it was easier. I could have been cruel. I could have said things that would hurt her. But I realized that holding on to anger wouldn't get me anywhere. Sarah, what matters is that you learned, and that this never happens to anyone again." She nodded and walked away. I never saw her again, but I learned she became an advocate for workers' rights at the company where she worked. 5 years later, Blue Hair Snacks had become a small chain of food trucks. I still dyed my hair blue. It had become my trademark. But it had also become a symbol of resistance and dignity. I received an award from the local Chamber of Commerce for social entrepreneurship. In the speech, I talked about how a situation of abuse had transformed into an opportunity for growth. Sometimes the worst experiences prepare us for the best opportunities, I told the audience. Don't let anyone diminish you. Don't accept abusive treatment. And remember, sometimes all we need is courage to show who we really are. I ended the speech by removing a hair tie and letting my blue strands fall over my shoulders. The audience exploded in applause. After the ceremony, a young woman approached. She had pink hair and determined eyes. "Emma, my name is Ashley. I work at a company where my boss treats me badly. After hearing your story, I decided I'm not going to accept this anymore." I smiled and gave her my card. "Anything you need, call me. No one deserves to be treated like I was treated." She squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you for teaching us we can be stronger than we think." I went home that night thinking about how life can be surprising. 6 years ago, I was a scared employee who accepted humiliation because I needed the job. Today, I was a respected businesswoman who used her platform to defend others. It all started with a simple decision: dyeing my hair blue. But in reality, it was much more than that. It was deciding I deserved to be treated with dignity. It was choosing to fight for myself when no one else would. And if I could go back in time and talk to that scared Emma in the apartment bathroom, mixing blue dye, I would tell her, "Do it. Dye that hair.